Well, of course they invited me to a conference about the confluence of technology and hauntology, because I'm old enough to remember the invention of the wheel, and I'm going to die before all of you. And of course we're having conferences about this sort of thing now. Science and magic used to be a single field, and they only split definitively around 350 years ago. Isaac Newton was an alchemist. So was Robert Boyle. The famous alchemist and seer John Dee worked here in Manchester for a while. And the table he worked on bears the scorch mark of the hoof of the devil himself, whom Dee evidently summoned at some point for career advice. Popes and emperors were patrons to alchemists. And 100 years after that, the Industrial Revolution happened. Here we are now at the top of the post-industrial revolution, at least in Britain, trying to recover from, he said, something's wrong with this file, excuse me, trying to recover from the days of the dead run from Stephenson's rocket to the end of the space shuttle fleet, looking around and wondering what the hell happened and looking for language to explain it to ourselves, while carrying in our pockets magic mirrors that we control with mystical gestures. John Dee would approve. There's a ghost train in Manchester. There's a dead nightclub owner in Manchester who still shows up on CCTV from time to time. A yellow dog and a headless hound, girls on fire and old soldiers standing by the feet of beds with daggers drawn. Hannah Beswick, the Manchester mummy, so terrified of premature burial that she arranged to be interned above ground in event of her apparent death, in case she should suddenly awaken. She was embalmed and stuffed in an old grandfather clock case. And her ghost still walks the factory that was eventually built over the ground her house stood on. They even have a park named for a haunting here, Boggart Hole Clough. Boggart coming from a German word meaning gate ghost. The nearby Bridgewater Canal and the Wet Earth Colliery, where the engineer James Brindley magically made water run uphill, helped kickstart the Industrial Revolution. The first industrial estate in the world is over at Trafford. This might have been the perfect place to have this conversation. And what are we here to talk about? I amuse myself by calling it the confluence of technology and hauntology, because I'm easily amused. 3 or 4 years ago, I was in Berlin talking about the spirit tracks under smart city streets and electromagnetic radiation from our devices making us see ghosts. And today, everyone in Silicon Valley is fighting over digitally haunted cars that spookily drive themselves. Ghost trains are already here. I passed one on the way into London at Stratford. The driverless train that connects the ghost town of the post-Olympic Stadium to the ghost town of Canary Wharf, where practitioners of the dark arts created the arcane financial spells that mutilated the world economy. Our computers continue to fight possession from forces beyond the veil of human sight. And Facebook are trying to curse people with magic spells cast at their timelines, like witch doctors incanting over their pointing bones. Hell, the pointing bone we use on our computer screens to make things happen is actually called a cursor. I've got 1 million of these. As an aside, here is that magic trick. It's an Aleister Crowley story. Aleister Crowley told a friend he could make any random fall over without touching them because he was the great beast. To illustrate it, he walked behind a stranger for a block or two, and he matched his footsteps precisely to the stranger's footsteps, and Crowley then scuffed his heels as if he was stumbling and falling, and the stranger fell over. The stranger had heard himself fall, and so he fell over. If Facebook tells you that everything around you is sad and depressing often enough, you get sad and depressed. All hail the great beast 666 of black marketing. Technology is the process of replicating the condition of magic. That's the paradigm. Look at a Segway and tell me it's not the world's shittiest witch's broomstick. We only wanted jetpacks because we couldn't make magic carpets work. The first pair of augmented reality glasses I ever saw were the iron goggles worn by Cunning Murrell, last of the Essex cunning men, that allowed him to see ghosts and demons superimposed on the rural landscape. And they would date back to 1825. I've said again and again that Steve Jobs' constant reiteration that the iPad was magical was deliberate and done with specific intent. And we listened. We knew it was good technology because it had the language of magic in it. We made it do things by pointing at it. The screen was full of sigils. It was a 21st century spell book. And brilliantly, we didn't have to charge it up by murdering a chicken or wanking on it. And when people now say, well, Apple aren't innovating as much as they used to, what we mean is they're not making magical artifacts anymore. Their magic carpet has fallen to earth, and now they make wristwatches like lumpen mortals. Wristwatches aren't magic. We already knew that time passed, and we'd learned to approximate divisions of time by looking at the sky. We were telling the time 5,000 years ago using large stones. Wristwatches just meant we didn't have to carry a fucking obelisk around with us. Magic's fickle. And it's also true that for every genuine seer and shaman, there was some theatrical guy in black trying to sell shiny magical things to people with money. So if you're looking for the people who started us down this track of talking about technology in magical terms, it wasn't us. They started it. We're going to finish it. We were sold magic as the affordance of technology, from the term auto-magic on down. And we were sold this magic as the provision of personal agency. 15 years ago, I couldn't move on the web for people talking about the internet as channel for emergent democracy. 5 years ago, everyone couldn't shut up about smartphones as the new computing paradigm that put the world in our hands. And now we're at the end of the current cycle, and the 5 dark towers of big digital technology are reduced to bullshit squabbles. I mean, sure, large ones, big ones rolling across the world and throwing their shadows over us all. But the sleight of hand is all over. There's a bit at the end of the TV series, The Thick of It, where spin doctor Malcolm Tucker, frequently self-described as a practitioner of the dark arts, says in his final extremity, "Look at me. I'm not pulling anything out of my magic hat. The rabbits have fallen to pieces. Their fucking heads are coming off and frightening the kids." But the language of magic goes deeper. For as long as we've been on this earth, we have used the language of magic to describe the world and its mysterious workings. For thousands of years, magic and science were conjoined. Plato was a mathematician and a mystic, just like Isaac Newton. we dismiss magic, ghost stories, and the supernatural, and we leave them for entertainment and sales pitches. In doing so, we dismiss history. The story of magical language is, in fact, the history of the scientific method and the history of our education and the history of wonder. A world without magic and ghosts is a world where we can believe we can put the last 10,000 years in a box and consider it a done deal. Just as scientists just 120 years ago considered science a completed enterprise, aside from the nagging mystery of the luminiferous ether. We need history. We need context. We need to hear the ghost train rattle by to be reminded of where we've been. Talking about hauntings is talking about the ground under our feet. Right under your feet, right there, are 5,000 years worth of bodies, because this area has been occupied since the Bronze Age and was Brigantes territory before the Romans extended Watling Street up here and created Mamucium, the fort that Manchester became. There's barely a city in this country that isn't built on bones. And it's a way to understand how we got here, and a way to be mindful of wherever the hell we're sitting today, and a way to be aware of the landscapes we're in. Our ghosts are our history. Their voices are what we learn from. Our rituals are our methods, and our castings and workings are our scientific experiments. Magical practices to learn the true names of the things that make the world. Because in magic, when you name something, you can control it. CERN, the big accelerator, is a system for discovering the secret names of elemental particles. We converse with the dead like shamans to attain knowledge of the numinous, thereby transported into the mysterium tremendum et fascinans, the awful and marvelous mystery of the system of the world. The seeds of the next cycle are here. In bits and pieces, people are trying to draw down the supernatural world into our future streets. All the VR and AR, the new location technologies, the sensors and geofences and every other bloody thing. Someone even hacked the doors of their home to unlock upon hearing the words, "Open Sesame." Even with the relative failure of Google Glass, there are still any number of people who want you to have iron goggles to see the spirits with. Being aware of the landscapes we're in may yet become very important, because AR is just the most recent point on a millennia-old human process, of dramatizing our landscapes. A megalith and an AR anchor are essentially the same thing. Something dropped on the landscape as a sign and a piece of information. It's the same impulse. We use the language of magic and ghost and ritual to pass science and technology, because science and technology always was and still is a process of magic and ghosts and ritual. Same thing. The mistakes we made were in consigning that language to the storage room of things we think we've grown out of, in thinking we were somehow better than it, and in leaving its scattered remains to the illusionists and the hucksters who no self-respecting alchemist would ever give house room to. Embrace it. Embrace it. In pursuit of replicating the condition of magic, we are attempting to create our own new spirit world. We build magic doors that open upon the speaking of magic words, and we want our mystic artifacts to whisper to each other across the ether. and we use magic mirrors to enact remote viewing across the limb of the planet, and we arrange for Plato's daemons to mutter at our shoulders. Yeah, there are monsters who want to reach through from the other world and possess us, and we instinctively use the language of magic in those cases too. Magicians would draw a circle in salt or with a knife to protect themselves from the other world during a working. And one of the top private communication systems on the internet today is called Silent Circle. Don't get me wrong, magic is hard work. We use the word magic to describe something difficult done without effort. But that's an unfair description of how magic was done. Magic was and is the all-devouring work of decades. Magicians from the high castes of ancient Egypt to the cunning folk of English villages were writing code just as surely as that person who wanted their front door to be an occult portal from ancient myth. In the mode, perhaps, of Stuart Brand stating that we are as gods and might as well get good at it, we're building our own spirit world. We're summoning the mysterium tremendum as the condition we want to live in. The spirit world as big and scary thing, the inhuman continuum in which we operate. Lots of people view the spectre of non-biological intelligence as the devil. Everyone from Elon Musk to Stephen Hawking is apparently trembling at its prospect. But the devil is a story. It's a fiction. It's no more than a made-up name for a thing that is inside us, just as the angels that Aleister Crowley conversed with just bore his secret true name for elements of his own subconscious. No more than code. The sleight of hand merchants have been sent to die in Las Vegas, carrying their frayed top hats and their headless rabbits and doves reduced to beak and bone. Let them go. They're of no use to us anymore. We don't need them. In the world of haunted machines that we're determined to bring on, we need alchemists. We need people with feet in both worlds. People prepared to consider a world of ghosts and spirits with presence and agency. People like the cunning folk, equipped to translate the high code of that world for the rest of us dung-stained villagers. People who know their history, which also means knowing their folklore, because that's where the lessons are. Magic is our language and our story, and we can't ride the ghost train into a future of haunted machines without them. Thank you for your time.